Okay, so imagine this. It's the late 700s, and you're trying to run a massive kingdom.
A huge, sprawling empire.
But it's like you're trying to run a modern computer system, except all your files are on floppy disks, and none of them are labeled correctly.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, you had government officials who could barely read, priests who couldn't properly read the text they were supposed to be teaching.
So communication wasn't just slow, it was completely broken. And for an emperor like Charlemagne, that was a huge, huge problem.
It was total chaos, really. Literacy had just collapsed after the fall of Rome. But that crisis is exactly what sparks this incredible reaction, this huge top-down effort to, well, rebuild knowledge from the ground up.
And we call that the Carolingian Renaissance.
Exactly, an intellectual and cultural explosion, mostly happening in the late 8th and 9th centuries.
And the mission here wasn't just to make things a little bit better. It was about reversing centuries of decay by going back to the source, to the knowledge and the structure of the old Roman Empire.
Right. And today we're going to get into how one leader, Charlemagne, put changes in place that didn't just fix a crisis, but really changed how we all learn and read forever.
To really get it, you have to start with the man himself, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, and then in the year 800, crowned Holy Roman Emperor.
He was the ultimate warrior, a conqueror, but he was also deeply intellectual, almost obsessed with learning.
And what's so fascinating is that he was a perfect example of the problem he was trying to fix. Here's the most powerful man in Europe, studying things like grammar and astronomy, but he himself could never really learn how to write.
That's right. The stories say he kept writing tablets under his pillow to practice at night, even as an emperor, but he just couldn't quite master it.
And that struggle is so telling, isn't it?
It is, because it shows he saw education as a real practical thing, not some abstract ideal. He knew firsthand how hard it was to run his empire when people lacked these basic skills.
But it wasn't just an embarrassment, it was a political weakness.
A profound one. If your officials can't read your laws, then your laws don't exist. The whole system just falls apart.
So his solution was really a matter of state security.
Absolutely. He had this grand vision of a unified Christian empire. That meant standardized laws, standardized religion, standardized everything. And to get there, he issued this famous decree in 789, the Admonitio Generalis.
Which was not a suggestion.
No, not at all. It was an imperial command. It ordered the creation of schools in every cathedral and every monastery across his entire kingdom.
He's basically creating the first state-sponsored education system in Europe since the Romans.
He was. And he put his money where his mouth was. He spent a fortune bringing the best scholars from all over Europe, from Italy, from England to his court at Aachen.
Turning it into the new intellectual capital of the world.
It became a hub for debate, for research, for learning, the absolute center of this new movement.
And any great project needs a lead architect. For Charlemagne's education plan, that person was a man named Alcuin of York.
Alcuin was a brilliant English scholar, and Charlemagne put him in charge of the palace school. His influence is, well, it's hard to overstate.
He taught Charlemagne's own kids, the children of the nobility.
But more than that, he created the actual framework for education. The blueprint that Europe would follow for the next 800 years, he called it the 7 liberal arts.
And you can think of this as the core curriculum for anyone who wanted to be anyone. It was split into 2 levels.
Right, and you had to master the first level before you could even think about the second.
The first part was called the trivium,
which was all about language and communication. It was the operating system for all other knowledge. You had to master Latin, because that was the universal language of the time.
And the trivium had 3 parts. First up was grammar,
which meant learning to read and write Latin correctly, a huge issue because the language had fractured into so many different local versions.
Then came rhetoric, how to speak persuasively, how to argue your case in public.
And finally, logic, which is really just critical thinking, how to build a solid, rational argument and spot a weak one.
So once you had mastered language and how to think, the trivium only, then could you move on?
To the quadrivium, yes. This was the next level, focused more on the physical world, the math and sciences of the day.
So this included arithmetic and geometry, which makes sense.
Of course.
But then it also had music and astronomy. Music seems like the odd one out.
You'd think so, but for them, music wasn't just art. It was applied mathematics, the study of harmony and proportion. And astronomy was the study of the mathematical order of the heavens.
I see, so it all fit together.
Perfectly. And the order was the genius of it. You can't grasp complex ideas about the cosmos if you can't read the book or form a logical thought about it first. It created this incredibly balanced education.
A system that pretty much became the foundation of all European schooling for centuries.
Yeah, that's right. But a curriculum is useless if you can't deliver it. Aachen was just one court. Charlemagne needed a way to roll this out across the whole empire.
And for that, he turned to the monasteries.
They were the only institutions that could handle it. They had the people, the space, the stability. He made it mandatory. Every monastery, every cathedral had to have a school.
And these schools weren't just for training future monks.
No, they were also for local boys who could go on to become administrators for the state. They became the librarians and the publishers of Europe.
And that happened in a special room called a scriptorium.
The engine room of literacy. This is where monks worked, usually in total silence, copying books by hand. Remember, there's no printing press. This is the only way knowledge gets spread.
It's hard to even imagine just how slow and expensive that must have been.
Incredibly. And they were writing on parchment, which wasn't paper. It was specially treated animal skin.
From sheep or calves, right?
Yeah.
A single Bible could take the skins of a whole herd of animals.
Exactly. So a book was a massive investment of time and resources.
Right.
One monk might spend an entire year just copying a single important text.
And they were copying everything. The Bible, of course, but also government records and, crucially, ancient Roman books that were literally rotting away in libraries.
That systematic copying effort is what suddenly made books and knowledge available again on a much wider scale.
But even that would have been useless if the writing itself was a mess. And before this, it was.
A total mess. Imagine getting an email today, but every word is in a different font and there are no spaces between any of the words.
It would be unreadable.
It was almost unreadable. Each region had its own messy, dense, confusing style of handwriting. A scholar from one place might not be able to read a book from the next town over.
And this is where we get to, I think, the most important innovation of the whole era, something that affects every single one of us today.
Carolingian minuscule.
It sounds technical, but it was a revolutionary new style of writing.
It introduced a few things that seem so obvious now. First, it standardized the shape of letters. So an A in one part of the empire looked like an A in another.
Second, it brought in lowercase letters.
Much faster and easier to write than all caps.
And then, the biggest one of all, it added clear spaces between words.
That is the game changer. Before this, most Latin was written in what's called scriptura continua.
Meaning?
One long, unbroken string of letters. Like that.
How could anyone even read that?
You had to do it out loud. You'd sound out the syllables to figure out where one word ended and the next began. It was slow, laborious.
So the spaces let you do what?
Read silently and quickly. It completely transformed reading from a public performance into a private, internal process the way we all read today.
It's like they invented a universal font for the empire. Suddenly, knowledge was portable, easy to share, and reliable.
And it was so good, so efficient, that centuries later when the printing press was invented, the first printers based their fonts on it.
So the letters we're typing with on our computers right now
Are direct descendants of Charlemagne's script. That's his legacy, right there on your screen.
amazing.
Yeah.
And this standardization also applied to the language itself, Latin. It became the single language of government and scholarship, connecting Charlemagne's era directly back to Rome.
And speaking of Rome, this whole period was maybe the greatest act of cultural preservation in history. Carolingian scholars actively hunted down ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts.
On every topic you can imagine: medicine, architecture, philosophy.
And these texts were physically decaying, falling apart in damp monastery libraries. They saved so much knowledge that would have just vanished forever.
So when we study someone like Caesar today,
You can probably thank a monk in a scriptorium who copied his work around the year 800. Without them, it would be gone.
this link between education and control was also central to religion, right?
Absolutely. Charlemagne needed priests who could actually read the Bible correctly. He was terrified of them teaching local superstitions or getting the core ideas wrong by mistake.
So he standardized the church service itself.
Exactly, the liturgy. He made sure that the prayers, the readings, the rituals were the same in every church across the empire. It was another tool for unity and control.
And this revival wasn't just about books. He wanted his capital, Aachen, to look like a new Rome.
He did. The architecture from this period is incredible. His Palatine Chapel, for example, has this huge dome and beautiful mosaics. It was a statement
Saying what?
saying, we are the new Rome. We have the power, the wealth, and the sophistication of the ancient emperors.
So in the end, All of this, the schools, the curriculum, the libraries, the script, it did more than just fix a short-term problem.
It created the entire foundation for what came next. It was the intellectual bedrock for the High Middle Ages.
When the first universities started popping up in the 12th century.
They could only do that because the network of schools and the libraries full of books were already there, waiting. The intellectual infrastructure was in place. It survived long after Charlemagne's empire fell apart.
So, what the Carolingian Renaissance really proves is that focused leadership and a clear set of standards can completely change the course of history for 1,000 years.
I think so. And here's a final thought. Next time you're learning about some ancient Greek philosopher or a Roman general, just take a second to remember that the only reason you know their name is likely because some monk, 1,200 years ago, thought their words were important enough to spend a year of his life copying them down, letter by slow, careful letter.
Good luck with your studies.